So we'll be talking about construction and manufacturing, and we'll take each separately. It's about 42 slides. You know that manufacturing is 13.5% as an industry contribution into the GDP. We finance 20%. In the 80s, manufacturing was about 20% of its contribution into the GDP, and it's been slowly, not declining because it's declining, but relative to others growing, its share has declined. And here we show you how manufacturing has performed over time. And 0.1% as of 2014 for the whole year. And of course, in 2016, you will remember that when we had a growth of last quarter, 3.3%, manufacturing came strongly for that quarter only at about 8%. We'll see how it performs by the end of the year. But as of 2014, manufacturing had contributed, growth had been 0.1 of a percentage point, with a major decline during the recession of 2008-2009 when the world demand for goods plunged. In terms of rand value, nominal 2.12 trillion rands by 2014, rising from about 2001. That's the volume of the end income in manufacturing. And then, of course, by sector, it's wood and paper, petroleum, chemicals, food, beverages, transport equipment, and metal and machinery and other. But this is the division of how manufacturing works here. I want to pause at this point just for a second to really discuss about the planning systems of government. That in part we need to understand how the sectors perform, and the information on the sectors must inform planning. And in those sectors, petroleum, chemical products, and so on, you have something called supply and use tables that are used by other industries. So these numbers have a lot more meaning just not the headline figure, but the entirety. And this is where the large sample surveys assist us in getting insights into what is happening in each of the economic activities. And yes, sales of goods and services, these are broken down by province, Gauteng contributing 40%, and of course in GDP terms, Gauteng is 36%. But in terms of this particular area of manufacturing, it's even higher than the 36% contribution to the GDP with the Western Cape, and of course the three provinces, Gauteng, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal, already by themselves come up at 77% contribution across. Now here we are looking at concentration ratios for income in manufacturing, which enterprises contributed the largest. So 5 largest enterprises, 13% in 2005, up to 16% in 2014. The largest 10, 26%. That's the proportion earned by those. And then the largest 20, 37%. They have a disproportionate share in terms of what they earn. And then the 50, 49%, there when you come to 50, it's almost a proportionate share. And then, of course, not proportionate share, but the largest 50 come. And then the largest 100 come in at 58% as of 2014. So we can see that when you come to 100, the numbers are almost fluctuating. 54% in 2005, 57%, back to 54, and then 58% now. That's a fluctuation. Profit margins, we can see that profit margins are declining from about 7%, 8% at the peak of South Africa's growth story, which also coincided with the crash of the markets. And then since then, the profit margins have been low at 4.9 and 4.4% respectively. That's the average for manufacturing, but furniture and other manufacturing have been having a relative better profit at 9.4%, and metal and machinery at 2.9%. And we will see the share of, our understanding and what is coming out of these numbers is what the share of these profit margins are by sector. But we should bear in mind what contribution each sector has, and I think you have seen that already in the previous slides. In terms of employment, we've lost 0.25 million, 250,000 jobs lost in manufacturing from 2005 up to 2014. We see that there we have 1.19 million jobs in manufacturing. Out of 16 million employed, so it's about 10% contribution in employment, overall employment, and 13% overall contribution in terms of GDP. And here we saw the profit margins. We finish taking on about 9%, profit margins of 9%. And here we see metals which were the least profitable, actually having a lion's share in terms of contribution in employment in manufacturing at 21% here. There you can see, where is my mouse there? There it is. It shows a small red mouse. About income, we by size, income and employment, and we are plotting those here. We can see that large businesses cover 82%, and small and micro businesses take the rest, which is about 18%, the residual of that. So the question that we would have to ask or answer is the set aside of 30% for small and micro. What should it trigger? That's the question that in relation to manufacturing, because that's what government says that let's have set aside of 30% procurement. So that's what the question should be in terms of what it will trigger. But also in terms of employment, although it's 9% in terms of income, in terms of employment, this is 34% small and medium in manufacturing. So what will that set aside trigger? That's the kind of discussion that policy makers will have to have now that they have this kind of information. Now, in terms of selected divisions here, food and beverages, from there we can see income and employment, employment at 19%, income at 17%, petroleum 34%, employment 15%, and furniture and other manufacturing 3%, employment 5%, but also we know that furniture has been the most profitable at about 9%, but very, very small in terms of both its contribution in terms of income as well as in terms of employment, but very, very profitable, as we had seen in the previous slides. Well, of that 1.19 million people employed, about 500,000 of them are in Gauteng, and the others, 200,000 in KwaZulu-Natal, and another 200,000 in Western Cape. This is how the employment in manufacturing is distributed. Of the 1.19 million, 400 or almost 500,000 in Gauteng. And if you look at the metros, there is about 52% of those are in the metros, eThekwini, Cape Town, and Johannesburg, and of course, as well as Ekurhuleni and Nelson Mandela Metro. Those are that brings the number well beyond 52 to about 68%. So what we see here is the degree of urbanization, or at least that manufacturing takes place in urban areas because of manufacturing requires conglomerates to manufacture, so it has this implication. Average wages, I don't know why I'm saying ages. Here we see that petrochemicals pay the most, 266,000, and textiles and clothing the least at 69. And of course, furniture at about 114,000. Makes the largest profit, pays second from the bottom. It's the smallest, one of the smallest, but has the largest profit margin. Metals and manufacturing is number 5. Employs probably the largest number of people, has the least profit, but yes, it is number 5 in terms of ranking. What has happened in manufacturing in terms of capital and expenditure, CapEx? It's been growing to where it is now at 79 billion rands in 2014 from about 41 billion in 2005. And capital expenditure on new assets in manufacturing, largest investment in petrochemicals, food and beverages, transport equipment, metals and machinery, and of course very little in terms of furniture. But the biggest contributions have been in the manufacturing center capex, 39% in petrochemicals. By product group breakdown, petroleum chemicals, food and beverages 19%, and metals and machinery 17%, and other 18%. So what we see here is what drives manufacturing in South Africa. The products in terms of income from most popular manufactured products, or most common petroleum-related products, 20%, motor vehicles 5%, and then the rest are distributed throughout that 71%. Now, we change gear into construction. So we have 10 industries, and then we run this frequently, every 3 years, others every 5 years, with construction and manufacturing coming in as we report now. Now, contribution of economic activity to construction, we have spoken about manufacturing, which we said is 13.5, as we can see there. And now construction is 4.1, almost a third of what manufacturing contributes to economic activity. And of course, this is you can see the build-up to the stadia for the World Cup in 2010, and then of course, construction dropping flat during the year of the World Cup itself. But the build-up is very, very strong here. Roads, stadia, infrastructure, everything. And we see some pickup 2013 and then in 2014 at about 3.6, but the highest growth was experienced as we went towards income in construction, 392 there we are billion. By 2014, it has increased over a period of time. And total income broken down by type of service. Here we can see civil engineering structures, construction of buildings, this taking about 67%, a lion's share of construction. Electrical contracting, very somewhat small. And here sales of goods and services broken down by province. Here we can see Gauteng at 38%. We recall that in terms of manufacturing it was 40%, and in terms of GDP it's about 36% of and Western Cape 15% from 19%, and KwaZulu-Natal 12% from 19% in manufacturing. That's what contributed in manufacturing, but in construction, 12, 15, and 38. And then these are the concentration ratios. The largest five take 15% hovers around that, 13% now. The largest 10, 19, 21%. The largest 20, they have 25%. The top 50, 33%, and that grows from 22. And the big 100 take a lion's share of 40%. Profit margins in construction, highest around 2007, and now have dropped and fallen flat to about 2.9. And we know that manufacturing is at the profit margins in manufacturing was 4.9, and the entire construction industry is 2.9, with construction of other structures giving a very good profit. Shop fitting, site preparation, all those are much more profitable than construction of buildings themselves. And civil engineering structures, 1.4, and construction by specialist trade contractors, the margins are very, very small. Employment, 502, 99,000 more people employed in construction compared to 1.19 million. Employment here is increasing, whereas in manufacturing it's declined, and one has to find out why. Probably because of introduction of technology in manufacturing compared to introduction of what introduction technology could be in construction. Is a little tricky there. It's still a labor-intensive, labor-producing industry, or labor-engaging industry. Construction of civil engineering structures, buildings, and that's the biggest employers. Other building completion, electrical engineering, and then a small quantity of labor in specialist trade contractors. Now, income and employment by enterprise size. These are small and micro enterprises. In terms of income, the income share of this is about 24%, and of course employment at 39%. Share of employment is 39% if we take micro. And here the policy pronouncement of set-asides at 30% from government procurement. The question would be how much more employment, how much more income would come from there. But this is important information as we look at set-asides for small and medium industries. Income and employment for selected divisions. Here is income and employment. Here we can see construction of buildings and construction of civil, those contributing 65% in terms of construction, and then employment, or rather income, 63%, and employment 55%. These two activities here, construction of buildings and construction of the engineering. And then the rest are distributed in that kind of fashion. And of course, Gauteng, we have said, takes the lion's share of construction at 36%, KwaZulu-Natal 16%, Western Cape 13%. Salaries and wages, entire construction industry, 122,000, but does not go into the area of manufacturing, where in manufacturing salaries are around some salaries are around 286,000. But the bottom one is still similar. It's very much similar to what we see in manufacturing for clothing, whereas the amounts of salaries are about 69,000. Average income here slightly smaller, lower than that is in manufacturing. Capital expenditure on new assets that has been growing at 12 billion there by 2014. And then capital expenditure of new assets, construction, civil engineering structures 28%, and renting 18%, and site preparation about 16%. Those are the lion's share. And that's about our story in terms of manufacturing. So let me get back to the first point I made, which is the country has decided that there will be set-asides of 30% for small and medium-sized industries, and therefore we've looked at manufacturing and construction, and looked at the small and medium. We've got the data there, and of course there are other 8 industries that have to be looked at, so that the 30% set aside has to be thought through as to what will it trigger in terms of employment, in terms of incomes, in terms of all kinds of things that are necessary, both goods and services, as well as delivery of goods and services, as well as employment itself. But the release is about the numbers, but there are policy implications that have to be taken up from the numbers that we have presented. More importantly, small and medium businesses set aside. Thank you.